most people make the mistake of believing that emotional intelligence is the same thing as mental strength. It is not. EQ is a slice of the broader umbrella of mental strength. Go back to the definition again. Mental strength is the ability to regulate not only your emotions, but also your thoughts and your behaviors productively, even in adversity. That's the biggest difference. It's why I think, Dov, and you can tell me whether or not you disagree with this or not. I know you will. That's how you run your show. I think it's what makes mental strength the leadership superpower of our times, because much like we've been hearing about EQ, perhaps ad nauseum for the last decade, it has been the buzzword in leadership.
Yes.
It is just a slice of this broader giant called mental strength.
Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Today, we are going to cut through the noise and unlock the fiercest strategy for leadership excellence. There's always been talk about self-leadership, but that's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's talk. A lot of times it's not got any meat to it, and rarely do leaders take the gloves off and dive into it. Well, today, my guest is going to challenge you to forget everything you thought you knew about self-leadership. Because today, we're ripping up the old maps and charting a new territory for finding what it takes to really lead yourself in order to lead others. And we're going to do that with our returning champion, Scott Mautz. This former titan of Procter Gamble turned best-selling author is a sought-after scholar at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. He's going to enlighten us in the ultimate leadership superpower for the 21st century, which is mental strength. But let me be clear, Scott's not here to motivate and inspire. He's here to challenge you to a mental duel with your inner demons to help you emerge victorious. Ready to arm yourself with the habits that transform potential into unstoppable power? Buckle up. This is not your average leadership pep talk. Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Come for the stories, stay for the learning. Tap into our community of deeply curious learners by hitting that subscribe button right now. This isn't just another podcast, it's your passport to unparalleled insights. Every episode features the wisdom of global leaders, scientists, entertainers, philosophers, theologians, and journalists. With that, ladies and gentlemen, turn up the volume and help me to welcome the author of Mentally Strong Leader, returning champion, Scott Mautz. Welcome, Scott.
Yes, thank you. So great to be back again. Dov, I guess I didn't screw it up so much the first several times I was on your show, so you allowed me to come back and be a part of it, so I appreciate that. Looking forward to it.
It's always a pleasure, mate. I love having our chats. One of the things that we always like to start with is your emotional source code, where you came from, because it's very easy to look at someone like yourself who's a very successful author and you're doing all kinds of very powerful things and sort of think, oh, this guy's already there. But that's not where people start. And it's really interesting. I know you've written 4 books now, and we've talked about some of the other ones in the past. This one's about mental strength. I believe we teach that which we need to learn. So I'm going to assume, forgive me for assuming, but I'm going to assume that mental strength wasn't always your greatest thing. So talk to us about pre-mental strength for Scott.
Yes, there's no doubt about it, Dov. The emotional source code is the right thing to start with our discussion. It's a pretty clear blueprint for me. If you go back into my childhood, I grew up with a lot of physical disabilities and challenges. I had severe scoliosis. I have feet that aren't normal. They're kind of small and club foot shaped in size, if you will. I walked very awkwardly. I had to have both hips replaced early in my adulthood life. It was tough as a kid growing up when you have enough disabilities that you look different than everybody else. I had to wear a full body brace. And, I just remember the cruelty that I would be exposed to and how that could wear me down and how that could make me feel less about myself, how that could puncture my confidence. I think my journey on becoming mentally stronger, my source code probably starts back then, Dov, and having to put up with some things that were pretty difficult to deal with as a child from a physical aspect, but then the social aspect of that, the physical disabilities that I had to work through, kind of primed within me this kind of a case study, if you will. I'm going to have to be able to walk the talk someday, so I'm going to have to work through the process of becoming mentally stronger myself. And I think that's where it started for me.
But that's retrospective. I think it's easy to look back and go, well, I must have known that I had to get stronger, but that's not what it feels like at the time. Obviously, I didn't grow up with your disabilities, but I can't imagine what that was like. Talk to me about being in school with a full body brace. Kids get ribbed because they got braces on their bloody teeth, right? I get it. Kids are shitty, right? We've all been there. But when you've got a full body brace on, I can't imagine that, and problems with your legs and your hips and your feet and the discomfort, aside from anything else, nobody else in the world, just your own discomfort of walking around. Talk to us about what it was like to be that kid, because you would have felt like you're in a very different world than everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. My sense of humor really helped pull me through it. But, I distinctly remember, Dov, kind of migrating toward a group of friends, really finding my own place. And then as it became more and more obvious, I was having physical issues as I got older, being abandoned by groups of friends at times, and then having to search for another new set of friends because, it wasn't popular to be with a kid who has a body brace anymore, who walks so funny. And they'd come up with mean nicknames for me like Mr. Twister because I would walk oddly with the problems that I had. So I found myself in a pattern of continually trying to find a group of friends. Then I might lose those group of friends because it became not cool to hang with me, and then reattaching myself to another group of friends, and so on and so on. So it was this constant rebirth cycle, Dov, and this constant need to be able to figure out, okay, how much am I going to give up of myself as I try to fit in? How much am I going to maintain pure to who I am, close to my values, and then let the world be damned if it has to be that way? It was a lot, growing up as a kid to have to deal with that constant cycle of trying to find my place in the world. But that's what I had to go through. And I do believe it shaped a lot of my belief and desire to write about mental strength to this day, like you said, which I figured out retrospectively.
Yeah, I can't imagine it was anything else. It would have to do that.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of a childhood, when you have that kind of an experience, I think that childhood is difficult for all of us for our own sets of reasons. But you brought up something right at the end there, which I thought was fascinating, which is this decision not to give yourself up, not to become something. Was that conscious? That would be rare, especially in a kid, because the desire to fit in, which is a substitute for belonging, is very powerful in human beings.
Yeah, you're right, Dov. But I think it was the first sign that I had some kind of burgeoning mental strength within me, because I distinctly remember having to use my values as my kind of anchor. I could clearly remember one group of kids in particular where I said, am I going to hold to my value of authenticity, sense of humor, being who I am, or am I going to give into that to mesh to this group of kids that I'm trying desperately to fit into now because my last group of friends abandoned me? I can remember at a young age having to be clear about what are my values and how can I use those as a life raft for me so that I don't lose my sense of genuineness and who I really am as I chase the next thing and chase the next thing and the next group of people to the next connection. Yeah, I think that was a first sign. I don't want to say gifted, but was forced to develop mental strength young.
Yeah, because, you're talking about values. And again, values is not something that even comes up in most people's mind until maybe their 30s, oftentimes much older than that. You're going to this place of values because I wanted to ask you, how did you specifically develop your own level of habits that would build the mental strength? It's rare to have that early on. Is that mom and dad? Is that a faith-based thing? Is that something else? Or was it just by virtue of you are thrown into this pit of children who can be less than, we'll just go kind. I think the term is children are dicks, but maybe that's just my life.
Yeah, hell hath no fury like a teenage kid. I can tell you that.
Exactly.
I think, and we'll get into it when we talk about the book, about the power of systems and frameworks in place to help you put habits in place. But when you're 13 years old and 14 years old, you don't have a lot of systems and frameworks, man. You're just trying to survive. And I remember the simplistic form, this is retroactively, of a framework that I had in place was simply being in touch with what truly makes me happy. And yes, you're desperate to want to connect as a kid for sure. But would I be happier being a part of a group of friends where I wasn't myself, or continuing to follow the path of who I knew I was and staying true to myself. And so my loose survival tactic was, look, I need to place in order the value of being a part of a group of friends versus being true to myself, and kind of rank order that, will you, if you will, and try to have both of them, but not have one come at the expense of the other. It was kind of my earliest framework, and again, we'll talk more about frameworks, but that's kind of what helped me.
So something that comes up for me that I found very interesting about the book, because I've spoken a lot about this subject, and I will be honest that I can get frustrated with people who think they understand mental strength, and for me, the language would be mental maturity, because they understand the book. They've read the stuff. They've taken the classes on emotional intelligence, and they think that they're mentally strong because they've read that book, or they think they're even mentally mature just because they can do it chapter and verse, but they don't understand it. This is a big part of the book, and a big part of how you're explaining to people to understand this. Talk to us about the distinction between mental, the strength, versus having emotional intelligence.
Thanks for pointing that out, Dov, because it's a common mistake. So starting with the simplest of definitions, so we're all on the same page here. Mental strength is the ability to regulate your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors productively, right? Even in adversity, I would argue especially in adversity, or if you want to shorthand it, it's how we manage internally so that we can better lead externally at work and in life. And most people make the mistake, Dov, of believing that emotional intelligence is the same thing as mental strength. It is not. EQ is a slice of the broader umbrella of mental strength. Go back to the definition again. Mental strength is the ability to regulate not only your emotions, but also your thoughts and your behaviors productively, even in adversity. That's the biggest difference. It's why I think, Dov, and you can tell me whether or not you disagree with this or not, and I know you will. That's how you run your show. I think it's what makes mental strength the leadership superpower of our times, because much like we've been hearing about EQ, perhaps ad nauseum for the last decade, it has been the buzzword in leadership.
Yes.
It is just a slice of this broader giant called mental strength. And in a world, Dov, where it's only getting busier, there's only more distractions, there's only more opportunity for us to doubt ourselves, the need for mental strength is going to only continue to increase. And while we know that if we want to succeed in life, that you have to be able to self-regulate, guess what? Newsflash, it's hard to do that. But if you can do that, if you can truly self-regulate your emotions, thoughts, and your behaviors, I really do believe it's how you train your brain for success and achievement. And that's what makes it the leadership superpower of our times. I'm curious for your take on that.
Well, I think there's another piece here. I want to see where you go with this, because yes, I think emotional intelligence is great, and I highly recommend that people understand it and study it. That's not the same as mental strength. Fully agree with you. Certainly not the same as emotional maturity, though. That's a different thing altogether. But when you use terms like mental strength, I think the challenge is this interpretation, and the interpretation is not even stoicism, false stoicism, which is I'm just going to shut down and I'm going to regulate my feelings by not feeling anything, by being a bloody wall and a set of armor and no vulnerability, and I'm not letting anybody in because, well, guess what? I'm mentally strong. I used to run that crap before I fell. Like, you can't knock me down.
Right.
Nothing is going to damage me. Why? Because I'm mentally strong. Right. I'm emotionally strong. I wasn't, but the armor was.
Yeah, that's right. Wouldn't you agree with this? To your point, the idea is not to minimize emotions, it's to manage the emotions. Those are two very different things. I don't know if anyone's ever given you the advice, Dov, check your emotions at the door. That's ridiculous advice, because we're human beings. We're going to experience, we're going to feel, we're going to have thoughts and emotions that sometimes are hard to control. The idea is to be able to not just react to them in the moment, but to react internally and respond externally, to manage the emotions, not minimize the emotions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, see, I think that this is exactly the point, Scott. I wrote a piece probably early last year where I talked about how people have taken on stoicism, but it's not stoicism. It's false stoicism, like false Buddhism, where it's like, well, feelings are not important. No, the Stoics said fully engage with the feeling. Just don't let it run your life. In other words, it's not about boxing it up and shoving it in some dark cupboard somewhere. It's be with it totally and absolutely in such a way that you are processing it, and you get so exercised and so well adjusted at exercising it, and you know yourself so well, you've done so much internal work that you go, oh, this is where this comes from. I get it. And it's got nothing to do with Bob, who I personally want to punch in the head right now. That's a reaction versus what's true. So, oh, I can manage that feeling much better now, knowing that this is not really about Bob. It's about something from my history that I need to deal with. And that's the awareness plus the management that creates the mentally strong behavior. Do you disagree?
I do agree with that. And I want to further build on what you're saying. I often say in keynotes, Dov, or in workshops, the following, which is we make a big mistake when we face adversity sometimes, which is we focus on letting it go, when what we should be doing is focusing on letting it be. Because letting it go, much as you're alluding to, is one of the hardest things to do in all of psychology. It's known as cognitive dismissal, and it is almost impossible to do because we're humans. We have memories. We have pain that come from those memories. And when someone tells you, look, dude, you need to just let this go, it's horrible advice. To your point, it's about letting it be, sitting with it in the moment, trying to engage in cognitive acceptance, letting it sit in the background, like you said, not letting it hijack you, not letting those feelings and those emotions hijack you, but letting them exist as your co-pilot, because they're probably never really going anywhere. But you can change your relationship with that co-pilot and how you react to them, and letting it be and sitting in the background and being okay with that and becoming comfortable with that is essential, which I think is a lot of the essence of what you're saying.
You just nailed it. That's exactly it. I know the book goes into that beautifully. And I want people to really understand that mental strength is not about repressing and denying. It's not about knowing the right things to do, but that's intellectual. And you talk a lot about this, having the mental muscles, build up the muscles. So let's talk about some of those muscles. I'm a bodybuilder, or was in a big way for a long, long time, not so much now. And my mates and I would always make fun of the guys who would come in with giant chests and shoulders and biceps and always wear sweatpants. And we called them seagulls because it meant if you took their sweatpants off in the gym, you'd see that they had these spindly little legs on top of this big body. So we go, oh, seagull, seagull. And people go, squirrel. We go, seagull. And I think that oftentimes that's the case with mental muscles. We build one, and we puff out our chest about this one, but not that. And there's a whole range of these muscles. It's like building a body. You got to have the whole thing. Talk us through some of the mental muscles that tend to get ignored that really help us to build that strength.
Yeah. And I'll build on your metaphor first, and then I'll do exactly that, Doug, because it really is a powerful metaphor to think of your mental muscles like your physical muscles. Here's the thing. You go back to your example. Forget the seagull, right? What would your term be for someone who's totally buff? Head to toe. Did you guys have a term for that, Dov?
Oh, yeah, of course. They're called wheelers.
Wheelers, okay.
So a wheeler or loaves.
Hello,
right? So guys who were wheelers would wheel around like they were carrying loaves of bread under their arms. So they would puff out the chest like they were carrying something under their arms so their shoulders stuck out. So those were wheelers or loaves.
Fair enough. So let's say we're talking about a group of wheelers who are built every muscle head to toe. Well, guess what happens when those wheelers stop going to the gym, Dov? Over time, the muscles atrophy and they become weak over time. So how do you change that? You have to do exercises. You have to get in and get repetitions in with those muscles. So that it's the same thing with mental muscles. You have to be able to know how to exercise each muscle and do it in the right way to build the habit so that you can do that. I'll get to the habit portion in a moment. I want to directly address your question was, okay, so tell us a little bit more about the muscles. If you break it down further, we gave the mental strength explanation. Now, if you go another level beneath that, my research has shown that, and I've been researching the topic for 15 years now, there are 6 core mental muscles that equate to mental strength. I'll tell you what they are and tell you why these 6 and not something else. They are, if you have strong fortitude, confidence, and boldness muscles, those are the first 3, as well as decision-making muscles, goal focus abilities, the ability to keep yourself focused on your goals in your organization. And finally, what I call the messaging muscle, which is the ability to stay positive minded, even in the face of negativity, and to have a quality and a presence and integrity to your intent and to your presence. If you can do all of those things, fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and messaging, you will be mentally strong. Now, some might say, okay, Scott, why those 6 things? Why wouldn't mental strength be defined by the ability to set a vision or the ability to strategically think as a leader? Here's why these 6 things in particular. First of all, they all require self-regulation skills. Think about it. Pick any one of them. Confidence. You could be the most confident person in the world, but one thing can go wrong at work or in life, and you could start to spiral down very quickly. You have to keep that confidence muscle going. You can be incredibly goal-focused, but then something goes wrong. Something blows up in your life. Something happens you didn't expect, and you start to become more scatterbrained. You can't lose. You have to keep exercising these muscles, which requires self-regulation skills, number one. The second thing, all 6 of these things, and this might surprise you, Dov, have been shown to most closely correlate with achievement in the face of adversity. And just to prove that out, I'll share one huge study that I talk about in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader. We've done this multiple times now, but we took 3,000 executives at a time and we asked one question. Thinking of the highest achieving organizations that you've ever been a part of, that overcame the most obstacles, what were the attributes of the key leader at that point in time? Every time we do this, Dov, every time between 90 to 91% of respondents describe a mentally strong leader. And they describe those 6 mental muscles in particular. It's just further evidence that it's these 6 mental muscles that equate to achievement in the face of adversity more than any other. I'll pause for that on a second before I go into any given mental muscle. Does any of this surprise you?
No, it doesn't surprise me, but as you said, I think there's other ones that I might have put in there, not necessarily as more important, but as equally important. But I think what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. And so that brings me to my question, which was, what turns them into a seagull? Meaning, which ones of those mental muscles are most likely to get ignored?
Now back directly to the question. Let me see what you think, because when I say this to most people, they're actually surprised. And believe it or not, it's the confidence muscle. And I'll tell you why. Here's what our research shows. First of all, let me just define confidence for you, Dov. Many people have a mistaken belief about confidence. Confidence is not, capital N-O-T, not. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It's your ability to manage your relationship with doubt, because we all have such a relationship. Even the most confident people that I interviewed, and I have interviewed a ton of people for the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, believe me, in the thousands stuff, even the most confident people that I came across would not tell me that they never have a breakdown in confidence, that there's never any doubt. They just know how to manage that relationship with their doubt quite well. So what we see happens is most people assume their confidence is a fixed matter. I am either confident or not confident because of the nature of who I am. And they kind of blow by that to say, there's not going to be much that I can do to change that about myself because it's the nature of who I am. And in truth, it's not true at all. The book helps you, first of all, assess which mental muscles you're strong and not. And I'll talk that separately. But once you figure out, in this case, if you're like the crowd, a lot of people ignore confidence and that becomes the seagull, the weak leg portion. You can do things to overturn that. The second one that we see that is really quite common would be people misunderstand their ability to become bolder in the choices they make in their life. And they underserve that ability to encourage more risk-taking in their life, to be bolder with their life choices and with the decisions they make as a leader. Why? Again, because we see people believe mistakenly boldness is a fixed quantity. I'm either a risk-taker at heart or I'm not. I either like to play the stock market or I don't. I'll either bet on red in a casino or I'll never go into a casino. And they don't understand that boldness is not a fixed quantity. It's something that you can work on over time. I'm curious to see if those 2 muscles, being the ones that are most often ignored, is a surprise to you or not.
Are they a surprise? I don't know that they're a surprise I think more than whether they're a surprise or ignored, I think that your point is really on point in that people will sort of give testament that they are not a risk taker. That's not who I am. I'm just not that person, or I just don't have confidence. And my answer to that is really simple. If you learn to drive a standard, do you remember the first time you drove? And they go, yeah. And I go, do you remember driving? And they go, yeah. I go, do you remember that you had kangaroo juice instead of petrol in the car? And they go, what do you mean? I go, because you would change gear. And they go, Carl, it would be like you were jumping around. And they go, yeah. And I go, but now you can drive a standard, talk on a phone, eat a sandwich, and have a latte while driving and changing gears. And they're like, yeah. And I go, that's how you build it up. You got so unconsciously competent because you rehearsed and practiced enough. And I think that oftentimes, even in imposter syndrome, which we know is 70% of executives have imposter syndrome. I've written about this, that I think one of the greatest gifts I ever got was imposter syndrome, because it makes me go, you know what? I don't want to look like a dick. I don't want to look stupid. So I'm going to get really good at this. And I'm going to feel the imposter syndrome until I don't feel it, because I've done it often enough that I can be absolutely certain. I love that you put those two together, because confidence and boldness, they kind of like one will hamstring the other one, but building both of those muscles, I can see how people have a fixed mindset about that. And that's a really great point, Scott. And that isn't fixed is a really important point.
Yeah, it's the classic Carol Dweck learning. How many times, Dov, have you read or heard about fixed mindset versus growth mindset in the last decade? It's like everywhere. If it's on a podcast now, I cringe a little bit, because we know that we've been there, we've done that. But people really do forget that. They assume, you hear the concept of mental strength, and they assume right away, my brain is wired the way that it's wired. It just is. So they even dig in even more when it comes to mental strength, that what they have, the quantity they have, is what they have. And that, by the way, I did want to make a point about the role of habits in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, because the reason that you have to believe that, even if you told me, well, Scott, listen, I got news for you, my friend, I'm in the fixed mindset track, which clearly you're not. You wouldn't be doing what you do for a living if you were. But even if you were,
Clearly, that's me.
even if you were, and I do know people who are in the fixed mindset track,
Of course.
the reason to believe you can become mentally stronger is because of habits. And I've been studying habit building science for a very, very long time. I like to think of almost as long as James Clear has been studying habit building science. Repetitions are key. We know that. If you want to build biceps, you got to get into the gym and you need reps, right? If you want to build your boldness muscle, your goal focus muscle, you got to get in the gym and you need reps. What give you reps? Systems and frameworks. And in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, it's built around 50 plus tools, 50 plus systems or frameworks that allow you to get those repetitions in, to become mentally stronger in the ways that you want to become mentally stronger. Each tool even includes the first small step that you take to get started, which is one of the biggest reasons we never form a habit. We don't even know where to start to form a habit. It also includes sections on what to do in moments of weakness. A lot of times we want to establish a new habit. We have all intent to do that. A moment of weakness occurs and we spiral out of control. Next thing you know, we're not on that diet anymore. We're not going to the gym anymore. We're not swearing in public like we said we would stop doing anymore, whatever it is.
Wow, you found one of mine?
Yeah. I can help you build a habit to overcome that.
I'm not interested.
Not interested, right? It's one of the distinguishing parts about you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the point being, we talked before about how self-regulation is hard. And I want the listeners to know that the arm around you, the help that you can lean on, is the fact that there's so many habits built into the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, to help you get there.
And I want to get into those habits and systems in part 2 of the show. We're already at the end of part 1. It's been awesome. Of course it has. It always is with you. Thank you, sir. So before we end part 1 of the show and welcome people to part 2, I'd love for you to tell people where they can find out more about you, about this book, and all of your books and all the other resources that you have available.
Yeah, you bet. You can go to scottmautz.com to find out where all my keynotes, my workshops, you can learn about all my books, including The Mentally Strong Leader. I'll tell everybody right now, I put together a little premium for your audience. If they want a free questionnaire, a 50-question questionnaire, it's a mental strength self-assessment. I'll talk more about this in part 2. That helps you figure out how mentally strong you are. You can get the mental strength self-assessment for free. Just go to scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift, and you could download a free 60-page PDF that includes that assessment and helps you get the most out of the book, The Mentally Strong Leader.
Beautiful. We'll make sure that and all other links to Scott on social media, etc. We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. If you, for some reason, missed them, they'll be there. You can just click on that and you'll find a way. Listen, this has been an amazing first part of the show. Thank you, Scott. We're going to be back in just one click. Till then, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what it really means to be mentally strong and the habits you can build. We're going to discover what those are, what the systems are in part 2. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.